Are you looking to attract butterflies, birds, and bees to your garden? Well, welcome to my channel. I'm a Central Texas gardener in Zone 8B, and in today's video, I'm super excited to share 8 plants that will bring the pollinators. And not only will they bring the pollinators, but they will thrive in our heat and drought conditions. Make sure you stay all the way through the end of the video where I share the #1 plant that you need to get if you are looking to support our monarch butterfly population. Salvia are excellent pollinator plants and in general very drought tolerant. Most salvia will prefer a full sun location. They can take a little bit of shade, but if they get too much, they'll get pretty leggy on you. I have several different varieties of salvia in my garden. Over here I have Salvia farinaceae, and in particular I have the Henry Dulberg variety, which tends to have a more upright growth habit, getting about 3 by 3 feet in height and spread. And then I also have a different variety of Salvia farinaceae. It's just more of that classic variety, a little bit shorter, about 2.5 feet in height, and almost has a ground cover like spread. If you let it, it can kind of really sprawl for you. Salvias, I have noticed, really look their best if you give them a couple of prunings in the growing season. So I'll usually prune them back about mid-spring and then again mid-summer. So if you can see all the butterfly activity on this side of the screen, I'm going to talk about that plant in just a moment. This is Indigo Spire's salvia, and this is actually a hybrid between Salvia farinaceae that we just discussed and another type of salvia called Salvia longa spicata. And it was discovered incidentally in California at a botanical garden. And this particular salvia is very drought tolerant, gets a bit bigger, about 5 feet in height and sometimes in spread in comparison to that Salvia farinaceae. But you can see all of this bumblebee activity. They don't seem to mind the difference or know the difference. They're on this just as much as the other. I will say a couple of different things that I have noticed is that the blooms tend to be, the bloom spires tend to be just a little bit more rigid, and also like a bit of a deeper blue, almost more purple than the Salvia farinaceae. And also this almost is like semi-woody, a semi-woody perennial. Let me show you the base of the plant. You can see that, but they can die all the way down in the winter time. So especially if it's a bit colder. So all of those butterflies that you saw in the previous segment were hanging out on this plant right here. This is Greg's Mistflower, and this is a Texas native that gets about 2 to 4 feet in height, but can get quite a spread because it spreads by rhizomes. This can take a full sun to part shade setting. I will say that they are a bit more water needy, and they look a little ratty by the end of summer because it's pretty hot. This plant is important in the reproductive cycle of the queen butterfly, and I primarily see the most activity. I mean, this is a lot of activity now, but I see the most activity in the fall. So if you want the butterflies, get the Greg's Mistflower. This is Fragrant Mistflower. I've got 3 of them here. This one, and this one. And Fragrant Mistflower is related to Greg's Mistflower, but the flowers are white instead of blue. And there's a few other differences. One is that these are primarily fall bloomers, and at the recording of this video, it's about mid-August, so I don't have any blooms to speak of yet, but they can sometimes give you some spring blooms. These are also, I found these also be a lot more drought tolerant than the Greg's Mistflower, needing less water. And these are a little bit less sprawling. They tend to have a more upright growth habit, but they do, and they can spread by rhizomes, so they can kind of overtake an area. But these will get up to 6 feet tall, so give them some room. Have I given these enough room? You know, that's always my struggle on this channel. I don't know, but we will see. The other thing I will say is that this plant I installed last fall. And then these 2 plants I installed this past spring. And these were in 4-inch nursery pots, okay? Now, they're not too far behind this one, okay? So even though this one has been in the ground longer, these 4-inch nursery pots plants have almost caught up to it. So that's another cheat code for the garden. If you're trying to save a little bit of money, You know, consider buying plants a little bit smaller. The 4 inchers are okay. They probably will take that transplant into your ground even better than a larger plant. This is Turks Cap, and this is a beautiful Texas native that is a perennial, does die back in winter, but it's probably one of the most versatile plants that you can have in your garden. Why? Because this will bloom for you and it'll perform for you in a shade location as well as a sun location. You cannot beat that. So if you've kind of got one of those weird areas in your garden where it's maybe sort of in between, get a Turks Cap. Now these can get pretty big. They can get about 4 to 6 feet in height and spread. But the hummingbirds love to stick their little beaks right in the middle of that flower. I've even seen bees crawl in there and kind of crawl back out. So definitely loved by the pollinators. Now, one thing I do want to mention about my experience with Turks Cap is that I did have a couple die back in the winter and then just not come back in the spring, and I'm not really sure what happened. And I have heard from some other gardeners that they had a similar experience. In general, my favorite time to install plants in Texas is in the fall because they get to establish that root system over fall and into winter when it's not quite as hot. And then they really start performing for you that following spring. But I don't know, this may be one that you might consider installing in the spring just to be safe. All right, this next plant may not look like much, but this is fall aster. And this is a Texas native that tends to bloom in the late summer through fall. And it gets about 1 to 3 feet in height and spread. I've got a couple of plants here. I definitely want to add some more to my garden and landscape just to extend that nectar source for the pollinators well into fall. And this might be a great mum alternative, right? You normally get chrysanthemums in the fall, put them in your landscape, and there's nothing wrong with that. But wouldn't it be great if you could use a Texas native alternative that comes back for you every year? So I originally wasn't going to cover this plant in this video, but I felt like I really had to. This is the desert willow, and it is an ornamental native Texas tree that gets about 15 to 30 feet in height. And it is just covered full of blooms through our hottest part of the year. The blooms are pink and tubular shaped, and the little bees and hummingbirds just absolutely love that. This is a plant that does not like wet feet like a lot of our drought tolerance plants. They don't like to be wet, and we've had some extra summer rain, and so this looks a little bit airy because it's defoliated a bit from all the extra moisture it's gotten. But it's fine, it'll recover, and it's still blooming without any issue. All right, guys, this is not one of the plants that I've included in the list, but I had to take a break and stop and show you just how stunning it is right now. This is Texas sage, and this particular variety is known as San Antonio rose. And this doesn't bloom through spring and summer unless there's a lot of moisture in the air, but it is an evergreen, and I don't know if you can see the bumblebee activity. It's also loved by the pollinators. All right, so I'm going to take y'all on another bunny trail for just a moment. This is my liatris, and this is Blazing Star. That's the name of the variety, Blazing Star. And you can see here it looks a little interesting. It doesn't look like typical liatris does. And I had wondered what was going on. Well, one of you fellow gardeners came to the rescue. Limitless Ends suggested Aster's Yellow, and I think that is totally correct. So Aster's Yellow is a disease spread by the aster leafhopper. It affects plants primarily in the family Asteraceae or Asteraceae, of which liatris does belong to. And it can cause a lot of different issues, malformed petals and things like that. Here what you're seeing, this sort of like prolific stem or flower formation. This is known as a witch's broom deformity, and that is one of the symptoms of Aster's Yellow. But also, can you see how some of the plant is green and some of it is yellow? That's known as chlorosis, and this is another symptom of Aster's Yellow. And so just thought I'd let you guys in on that, and thank you again to Limitless Ends. All right, guys, this next plant is probably my favorite Texas plant, and it is right behind me with the red flowers. This is autumn sage, or Salvia greggii, and I love it so much because it is an absolute workhorse in a Texas garden. Not only is it loved by pollinators, it's very drought tolerant. I hardly water these at all unless we haven't gotten any rain for about a month in the summer. And it's potentially evergreen. For me, it's been evergreen, but sometimes if we get a really harsh freeze, it may die back. Salvia greggii tend to get about 3 by 3 feet in height and spread. They can have a tendency to get a little bit leggy or airy looking, but you can usually manage that pretty well with 1 or 2 prunings a year. I wanted to show you a couple of places where I have autumn sage in my garden. Here is a white variety of autumn sage. And you can kind of see what I was talking about with some of that legginess. And so I haven't pruned this one as heavily. I will say, to be honest with you, the white variety tends to be a little bit denser in terms of foliage than the red or the pink. But yep, I probably really need to prune this. All right, so here and all the way through this entire bed, I have red autumn sage. And I just pruned these back about last week, I think, and they're already starting to put on new blooms. And this whole bed was installed about 8-9 months ago, and it's starting to fill in. It primarily gets western sun exposure, but you see I have a Monterey oak here, which is casting a little shade on a few of these, and they're doing fine, still flowering despite some of that shade. So here I have 3 autumn sages that look pretty short and pretty naked, and I have that same situation going on this side here. And so I think they just probably got a little more moisture, or maybe they're getting more shade than they like, but they were so leggy, and I really knew that I was going to have to prune them, and so I did. But what that means is that this whole bed looks really kind of ugly. I mean, I've got some Blackfoot daisy here doing a little something, but really it kind of looks bad. But that's okay. If parts of your garden aren't as pristine as you would like, sometimes that's just how it is. Plants need to recuperate, and you just got to do what you got to do. Now, you may notice that all this plant debris, like all these dried branches, I just took the clippings here, broke them up, and put them in this bed because, you know, that's free mulch. This plant may not look like much, but this is milkweed, and specifically it's a Texas native variety known as antelope horn milkweed. And milkweed is an essential host plant for the monarch butterfly. Now, monarchs will nectar on many different types of plants, but they will only lay their eggs on the milkweed. And so we have lots of different varieties that are native to our area. And I have a good garden friend of mine, Steven, who actually has a YouTube channel on orchids. I will link his channel in the description box, but he sent me a bunch of milkweed seeds, and so I'm excited to get those going. Now, you may notice that this is in a shady environment or a shady setting, and that's not what they prefer. They would like a full sun location. Now, I think this was here before we moved here, and we planted this tree here, and so it's just doing what it needs to do. But I've got a little volunteer, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to dig that up and transplant it where it can really do well. Now, I will say this, if you've got milkweed and it's established, you probably can't transplant it because it has a very deep taproot. I'm talking like a couple of feet. So you got to get them while they're tiny if you have any hope to be successful in transplanting them. If you guys found that video helpful, check out one of these next ones. And if you can see all this lawn behind me, well, I just submitted my landscape design to the HOA, and if all goes well, this October, I'm looking at an 1,100 square foot lawn reduction replaced with drought tolerant and native plants. So you guys stay tuned, and until the next one, y'all take care.